You know what's one of the other obvious benefits of the emergence of this space is well-educated people having brilliant and interesting conversations. The conversation between Joe Rogan and Terrence Howard is pretty surprising, isn't it? Because conversations like that remind us that now everyone's pretty well informed when it comes to, for example, spike proteins or cellular formation or the impact of gene therapies. Look at this conversation between a stand-up comedian podcaster and an actor and note how implausible that would have been 10 years ago. And it's because, in fact, as is acknowledged in the clip, of the conversations that Joe Rogan started, or at least amplified, and that we continue to participate in. What you recognize when a conversation like this takes place is that without the censorship industrial complex, without the ongoing legitimization of controlling what sort of information you get access to, centralized power cannot be victorious. Because when you have actors and comedians casually chatting about the dangers of gene therapy and spike protein, which you know the WHO treaty is designed to prevent going forward, you recognize that what we have in our hands now is seismic. We have the technology and the ability to create new localized democracies, to challenge for the first time the great minotaurs, the great monoliths of centralized power. And it's all come in that most extraordinary form, the podcast. In this case, in the conversation between Joe Rogan and Terrence Howard. Just notice how extraordinarily high the standard of conversation is, and the amount of information and standard of information that's being conveyed and exchanged here is astonishing.
They listen to everything I say.
They do.
I'm sure.
They do. You
took a lot of boring shit.
You took a bold stand, though, years ago when the governments were trying to poison their citizens. You took a very bold stand that nobody else took. That's what I was like, wow, I appreciate you, because I lost 3-4 jobs because I refused to take it. I refused.
I bet you feel better about it now.
Well,
especially when you know all these people that have health problems because of it.
Cancers have increased 300%.
Yeah. All-cause mortality up 40% in some age groups.
Pulmonary embolisms almost up like 500%.
Yeah. I wonder what caused that.
Well,
Crazy.
the spike proteins that's being built and collected within the system.
Pulmonary aneurysms are up 25%, all-cause mortality. It's unbelievable, isn't it, to hear those kind of statistics being exchanged in a casual conversation that's likely being viewed by about 20 million people. When you look at the kind of content that the legacy media is putting out, whether it's through late-night chat shows or news media, this is another world. The world we live in truly is another world. This is why that world is being maligned, because it's pretty clear that neither of these men are bad actors on a global stage. They're like free individuals chatting, and if you chat to either of them for long enough, I'm sure you'd come across subjects that you disagreed with them on. But that's hardly the point. What is significant is the ability to convey significant information that the establishment do not want being discussed. Believe me, Moderna, Pfizer, various NGO organizations are tracking, but indeed that was the start of the conversation, that was the point that they started on, tracking conversations like these and looking for ways to discredit it. The invention of the terms malinformation, misinformation and disinformation, the spate of global censorship laws are not being augured in order to protect you, just in case someone goes, hey, do you know what's good for you? Drinking paint or sticking a fuel pump up your ass. I saw one guy try it on a forecourt. It's a miracle cure. It's not there to protect you. It's to legitimize ways of preventing these conversations from going viral and getting popularized. If you look at the WHO treaty, it's essentially an attempt to ensure that were there another global event, medical, military, or meteorological, they would have the power to censor information. They would have the power to impose lockdowns. They would have the power to mandate medicines. Now, at the moment, because of conversations like this one, the one we're having right now, and because of the space created to a degree by Joe Rogan, it's very difficult for them to censor and control that information and prevent the sort of momentum that's gathering. And of course, inevitably, that momentum spills into politics and you get new political figures that would have just been shut down 10 years ago, you would not get the kind of diffuse political candidates, even though the systems themselves are creaking and straining and attempting to ensure that it's manageable and malleable and that you don't get radicals emerging and you don't get third-party candidates on the ballot. And you have elections in a country like mine where you choose between two globalists, but they can see the way the wind is blowing. They can see that this technology and this kind of communication will facilitate change, will facilitate radicalism, will properly facilitate decentralization, because you might disagree with me on 1,000 things, starting with this hat and ending with this one, but you might agree with my right to be free in the same way that I agree with your right to be free. And once we have that covenant between us, we are deadly lethal. And if you can amplify that to cultural, racial, sociological, hot button topics, I don't care, yeah, pro-life, pro-choice, you go for it, pro-gun, anti-gun, whatever you want to do in your representative region, you go do it. Minimal government, minimal intervention, only the facility for us to oppose global corporatism, to shut down the kind of corruption that happens when big pharma and the military-industrial complex puppet our collective governments exactly into the theatre of their own desire. Once we are united, they're finished. They're finished. So something that seems relatively quotidian, colloquial, vernacular and easy, like a chat between an actor and a podcaster, is the very kind of thing that could change the world. And that seems astonishing to me, even as someone that, to a degree, thanks to you, participates in those conversations. We can't continue to bring you this awakening and hopefully enjoyable content without the support of our partners. That's why I've got to ask you, and I'm glad to ask you, are you struggling with back taxes or unfiled returns? The IRS is escalating collections, adding, get this, 20,000 new agents and sending over 5 million collection letters to kick off 2024 to spend on things that you probably don't agree with, like wars and measures and a total lack of infrastructure. In these challenging times, your best defense is Tax Network USA. Don't let the IRS take advantage of you. With over 14 years of experience, Tax Network USA have saved their clients over $1 billion in back taxes. No matter the size of your tax issue, their expertise is your advantage. They specialize in negotiating with the IRS, aiming to significantly reduce your debt. Tax Network USA doesn't just negotiate, they also protect your assets from IRS seizures and manage your yearly returns for ongoing compliance. Importantly, they are licensed to help you with all state tax issues, regardless of where you live in the United States. The clock is ticking. Don't wait as the IRS steps up its game. Seize control of your financial future now. Contact Tax Network USA for immediate relief and expert guidance. Call 1-800-245-6000 or visit taxnetworkusa.com/brand. Don't let tax issues overpower you. Turn to Tax Network USA and find your path to financial peace of mind. All right, let's get back to this content.
I can walk you through what the spike protein did to the BRCA1 gene. That's that gene inside of our DNA that tells us that there's damage that's happening, almost like the crews that go along the highway and they immediately put up cones every time there's a problem. Well, the spike protein, which is no protein has ever been able to enter into the nucleus of a cell. Not only does it go to the ribosome to say, hey, you know what? I don't want you to produce whatever protein, like if it was a skin cell, you're not going to produce keratin anymore. You're just going to produce these spike proteins. That spike protein went into the DNA and it tells the BRCA1 gene, turn off. And that's the gene that says, hey, there's a mutation here. Let's scrap that thing. And so now the cancers are building up. The spike proteins weren't shedding from the body. They collected in the ovaries. They collected in the lymph nodes. They collected in the bone marrow. So now we have all of these diseases that's showing themselves because the body is overwhelmed trying to deal with the spike protein that's attaching itself to the ACE2 and the endothelial cells in our vascular system for everybody out there.
And the more you get,
boom, you're turning your system off. You're turning it off. Your body cannot defend itself, and it's just collecting.
More more important perhaps than the subject they're discussing, in this case, it seems massive corruption within the pharmaceutical industry and the agencies that regulate them and the governments that facilitated the mass uptake and the media that participated in that, and the very fact that it seems to be part of some peculiar global agenda, is this. Ordinary people that haven't been to university, that haven't been through the sanctioned channels of education usually designed to generate compliance, are autodidacts now. We're all educated. We're all awakening together. We can all participate in this conversation, and that leads to revolution. Why do you think it took so long before this book was allowed to be put into print at all and allowed to be printed in English? Because educated and awakened people, whatever you think of that particular piece of literature, or from some people's perspective, sacred text, the ability for people to educate themselves, to communicate openly, to find points to interface at, to find points where we are commensurate with one another, where we have a consensus, is extremely dangerous. They want us atomized, divided, lost, bewildered and confused, lost perhaps in primal pleasure and easy everyday distraction, belonging at best to our own desires rather than belonging to something sacred like service and unity. It can be found everywhere. There are people across the political spectrum that are willing to die for what they believe in. And regardless of what point of view it is you believe you're supporting, if you can find principles that are as close to universal as damn it, like free speech or representative systems of self-organization, then there is a chance. Do you see that even in this conversation, in this cultural artifact, the Joe Rogan podcast, you can see now systems of opposition, systems of dissent and disobedience, systems of potential revolution. And that's why during the coronavirus pandemic, the entire legacy media machinery descended upon Joe Rogan like the locusts they are. That's why anyone who opens their mouth in this space will face smear campaigns and attempts to shut them down. And if you look into it, you will find government agencies, big pharma countries, military industrial complex, NGOs, peculiar organisations often funded by government money participating in the surveillance and censorship of those individuals. But together, the good news is we can oppose their warfare and their lawfare. We can oppose their propaganda and their proper lies by awakening together. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you think in the comments and the chat. Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to see more uncensored content where free speech can flourish, join our live stream. Click the link right here to watch the next video if you want to, or become a member of a growing movement. Download the Rumble app and you'll be informed every time we make a new piece of content. Stay free.